Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. Confusingly, we were just talking about Neil.
Our mutual friend.
Shall I tell you the story that Neil told?
Yes,
Because he's very rude about you, Dylan. He tells a story that you got separated from your bike whilst travelling down the Aswan.
Oh,
so
right. Okay.
All your documents were on the bike, and you're there panicking, stressed, sweating, a sweaty mess in some office, and then you had to go all the way back, get your bike and come back again, and then you lost your underpants. He tells that story. I hope you don't mind.
And it's all true. Is it all true, Dylan? Now's your chance to defend yourself.
Was he implying that I only had one pair of underpants?
Yes.
Or what?
Yes, he was.
He was. He really was.
Because he judges everyone by his own standards.
Right. Because, there were so many people. I remember that Aswan ferry, there were like 10 Norwegians because I had done that twice, right? So I don't know if Neil knew me while we were, taking that ferry ride, or it was after. But I met Neil twice then in that case. Once in the ferry, and then after that, we said goodbye to each other, and I met him in what's the capital called? Khartoum. I think he was traveling with another group, and one of the girls had an accident and broke an arm or something.
Yeah.
So I had to ride one of their motorcycles into a hotel, a few kilometers. So while doing that, I lost my key, my motorcycle key. But I had a spare key, which was good. My spare key, I lost it while trying to ship the bike from Dubai to India. So, the shipping guys, they asked for it. I was like quite skeptical, but still I thought, okay, if they need it, here you are. And once the bike arrived in India, the key wasn't there. I had to break the lock and I was riding with a screwdriver in my pocket, turning it on and off with a screwdriver until Thailand.
The way Neil tells his story is that you were like really stressed and not coping very well, which if you watch your amazing film, you cope very well with stress. Whereas Neil gives the impression that he's cool as a cucumber. Any stressful situation, he just kind of relaxes and goes to sleep.
I don't think he was saying that Dylan was stressed. I think he just thought there were a few unfortunate things that happened to him on that ferry crossing.
I was stressed because I didn't know what was going to happen to me. They sent me back to Egypt, and I didn't know whether I would take the next ferry back to Aswan, to Sudan, and they would send the bike back to Egypt. I don't know. It was a stressful situation. I mean, especially the immigration people in Sudan, they gave me a hard time. They were treating me really bad. When the Sudanese sent me back to Egypt, there was a Swiss girl on that ferry. And she helped me a lot. She, once they sent me back to Egypt, the Egyptians or Egyptian immigration, they said, mate, you don't have a passport. You can't leave the port. That was my problem, both countries, they said, no, you are not allowed to be in our country. So the Swiss girl, she flirted with the immigration guys in order to help me.
Have you never tried that, Dylan, that tactic before?
I did. Didn't work. I was just trying to give you the opportunity to say something mean about Neil, but you've been a very loyal friend and not said anything against him. So leave that to us. We'll get him back for you.
I remember Neil pissed me off in Ethiopian embassy. I tried to give him some tips because I had heard from people who were on that first ferry. They tried to, get into Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian customs officers, they were asking for a letter, some kind of a letter stating that you're not going to sell that motorcycle in Ethiopia. And I was telling this story to Neil, and he was like, laughing at me, and he was like, not taking me serious. I remember that very vividly. And I thought, what a dickhead. He just... Neil today is a very different man to Neil I knew that at the time. 10 years later, I met Neil like a couple of years ago in Spain. And I couldn't believe, how different he is. He has become a nice, charming, a gentleman.
Excellent.
Compared to those days.
I introduced myself to you briefly many years ago at Austin Vince's festival. And I don't think it was long after your terrible van accident.
All right, yeah.
Now, that was probably, that must be at least sort of 8 years ago, mustn't it?
That was 2017.
Was it? Gosh,
yeah.
Seems longer ago than that. Terrible accident, wasn't it?
After that accident, it made me realize that I have a life to waste now. I don't know how we survived that accident. It was incredible.
Because it was a really heavy head-on collision, wasn't it?
Yeah, because that guy, he wanted to kill himself. He had written a letter and, turned around, and he was aiming for a truck. But the truck driver, he avoided him, hit him sideways, came back, hit another car which had just overtaken us. He was airborne, came right onto our, landed on our bonnet. I don't know how I survived that, or we survived that.
And you were in a VW van, weren't you? It was quite a huge van even, was it?
Yeah, it was a VW T5. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you in something much bigger now?
After that accident, we bought the same van, but with a high roof, because, we were so happy with that. After that accident, we were like, wow, this van is, that's what saved us. So we bought a second one with a high roof, which was pretty convenient for us. You could even stand in the vehicle. Now we have a Ducato. I was telling Clive that 2 years ago we started a camper van workshop. We were building camper vans. So when we started it, we didn't know whether we'll get any customers or not. We bought a Ducato just to show what we can do. But all of a sudden we had so much work. We built 12 camper vans in the last 12 months. We built 12 camper vans. So we were so busy. So in the end, when we got around to building this camper van, Martina said, more space, we keep it. So that was it. I had no say.
No, your kitchen looks like it could be in a camper van.
It does, doesn't it?
That wide angle lens. Yeah.
Galley kitchen.
Yeah.
My girlfriend has left me, sadly. So
I can't say I blame her, to be fair.
I know, it's similar thing, similar nephew-themed absence. So I get to leave the bike room and come into the warmth of the kitchen. It's luxurious.
Yeah,
it's lovely.
Bike room, not garage, bike room.
Get to sort of pretend it's my house for a few days.
My wife's just the other side of that door, so I'm not saying anything. Dylan, is your name Wickrama or Samar Wickrama?
Well, actually, it is Samara Wickrama. But, for most Europeans, that's a lot of gibberish, I'm
going to try and say it, and then you can say that again. So we're absolutely delighted to welcome Dylan Wickrama.
No, that was Wickrama is good.
Was that okay?
Yeah.
Gibberish.
No, I have given up. I have given up on that name. It's very difficult to convert you guys, to
anything other than English. Yeah.
How many goes do you give the average European to say it before you say it's fine? Just leave it. 3 or?
Why do you think I changed my name to Wickrama? I just halved it. It's so difficult because it is actually Samara Wickrama, or even Wickrama. Wickrama, I think all the Europeans, they would say Samara Wickrama, Wickrama.
Yeah.
But it's not Wickrama, it's Wickrama. Samara Wickrama.
Samara
Wickrama. Yeah.
Samara Wickrama. Perfect. Let's move on.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Sri Lanka. I left Sri Lanka when I was like 15. I lived in England for a couple of years because I had an English stepfather. That's how I got to Europe. Prior to coming to Europe, I had a very interesting life in Sri Lanka. Interesting life in the sense it wasn't like a boring life like in Europe. I was walking around most of the time hungry. I was always seen with torn clothes. Probably had like 2 pairs of shorts and no shoes. It's all because my father got killed when I was 6 years old. He was a upcoming businessman. Once he was gone, my poor mother didn't know where he had invested his money. So basically, we just lost everything, overnight.
How was he killed?
My mother and father and my youngest brother, who was a toddler at the time, I think like 1.5 years old, they were going to a wedding, and on the way back in the night, 2 robbers jumped into the train and demanded money, and they stabbed him to death.
Gosh, that would affect you for the rest of your life as a 6-year-old, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. I was the oldest, and I had to become a kind of a, father to my 3 younger brothers. And sometimes, I had to, go and work to earn a few rupees in order to help the family, after school. That was my life.
So where in England did you end up?
My stepdad, he lived in London, and then we moved to Bournemouth for a couple of years.
What was it like coming to England?
Pretty boring.
Is that how it felt? It felt boring.
No. I was so excited to be in Europe. I think, growing up in Sri Lanka, it's a very different life. No, we had basically nothing. And in Europe, you had everything a kid dreams of. I thought life would be like in a paradise. Basically, if you go to a supermarket, you have absolutely everything, could buy anything. But in Sri Lanka, it was not the case. Even if you had the money in Sri Lanka, I think life would be quite different. I mean, nowadays it has changed quite a lot. In the 80s, life was probably much more quieter. I mean, you didn't have internet, and you didn't have, you didn't know what the world was like. So you had to be there to see that with your own eyes, otherwise you had no connection. Nowadays, it has changed everything. Even if you go to a jungle somewhere, people would come up, the nomads, they would, pull up their smartphone out of their pocket and, just go to YouTube, and you can, Facebook or wherever, and you can travel. So coming to Europe as a Sri Lankan was very exciting.
When did you discover motorbikes?
It was in Sri Lanka. I think I was like 12 years old. One of my neighbors, he gave me a lift. He had a small, like a 50cc motorcycle. I mean, in Sri Lanka, in all these South Asian countries, motorcycle is the mode of transport. Nearly everyone is a motorcyclist, of course. So, there is something that I couldn't understand. Like, in Europe, when I came here and you see motorcycle, you just wave, you just wave at the other bikers. And I was like, what the hell's going on? Why are they doing that? Because in Sri Lanka, it doesn't make any sense because everyone rides a motorcycle. I was 12 years old, and this guy took me on a ride. Or he gave me a lift, I remember, and I couldn't stop laughing. I tell you, I was like, it was such a thrilling event. I was like, yeah, this is it. I want to have a motorcycle. When I grow up and when I have enough money, I would buy a motorcycle and I would travel around the world. This is how it just fascinated me.
So what was your first motorcycle in the UK? Or was it in the UK or was it somewhere else?
It was, yes. I think my dad, my stepdad, he bought me a motorcycle. It was a Yamaha CT125 or something. The guy who sold it to me, he just showed me, this is how the clutch works, and it cost us 60 pounds. I remember the first time ever I went over 60 miles per hour. And I was so scared that the wheel, the front wheel might come up, it was absolutely impossible to get do a wheelie on that thing. But I remember it was, I guess everyone felt like that, no? When you're riding a motorcycle over 60 miles per hour for the first time. That was the first bike. And then after that, I had XL 200 and CB. And I never had a big motorcycle until I was in Switzerland.
Was this in your late teens then when you got your first bike? And this would just be
Yes.
your sort of mode of transport at the time to get around on?
That's right. Yes. Yeah,
So
because my dad, he was a landscape gardener, and he also lived in some remote villages. I think there was a place called Gossage Old Saint in Dorset. Very tiny little village. So I used to come to Bournemouth to meet friends or chase girls or whatever. And I remember in those days I had a moped actually. Yeah, it was a 50cc 2-stroke moped, and this thing was making a hell of a noise. I remember coming back to our village. I used to push the bike home because I didn't want to wake anybody up. Like the probably last 500 meters, I would just push the bike in order to not upset your neighbors.
See, I bet, Clive, we did the opposite of that. We probably gave it the beans as we got closer to home.
I do remember my neighbours telling my mum, if he doesn't slow down, he's going to kill himself.
Yeah, I had that exact same thing.
Yeah, they were right. I broke my leg shortly after somebody said that.
Had you already started thinking about travelling on motorcycles at a much younger age, or was it once you got a bike you started to think about it?
No, even before I had a motorcycle, I was dreaming about it. When I was given this ride by my neighbor, I think I must have been like 12. And then I knew that, I'm going to do a world tour with one of those 50cc motorcycles, because in Sri Lanka, we don't have any, bikes bigger than 250cc because you're not allowed to ride. I don't know if they have changed that law now, but I inquired, why do you do that? Why can't you? They said, oh, you should not be faster than the police. So that was the excuse. So the police had only two 50cc motorcycles. So, you were not allowed to buy or import a motorcycle that is 250cc. And later on, when I, on my around the world tour, I took my motorcycle to Sri Lanka. And that was, my goodness, I had a tough time because every policeman and his dog would stop me to check the capacity of that motorcycle, the engine capacity. Really, literally, like every kilometer, they would stop me and say, "Hey, you're not allowed to ride that motorcycle." And I say, "Yes, I am allowed to ride that motorcycle because under that they have a special agreement. Agreement. If you have that carnet de passage, if you had imported that motorcycle as a foreigner temporarily into Sri Lanka, then you were allowed to ride that.
You're just deemed to be passing through."
What you should have done is just raced them because you'd have got away quite easily because you've now got a bike that's faster than
I did that couple of times.
Good man. So what was the transition then from the boy heading to Bournemouth and on his 50cc moped to the young man that set off around the world?
Well, young man, I think I was 40 years old.
Oh, I'll take it back. That's not young.
When I started my world tour, I had done a couple of long tours before that. Like I rode from Switzerland to India once, and to Morocco, Syria. I rode around India, Indian subcontinent on an Enfield motorcycle, Enfield Bullet. So I had done a few smaller tours. But why I started that journey was it was because I'd say you have dreams as a child, but later on. When you grow older, you tend to bury your dreams. The dreams, childhood dreams are not more important. You're basically trying to secure your life, trying to climb up this social ladder, money and career. That becomes more important. How many childhood dreams do people eventually realize? How you simply don't chase after them. But later on, I was in Switzerland. I was running my own small business. I had a workshop, repairing cars, selling cars, buying cars. But then a customer of mine who was quite a rich guy, he offered me. He said, "Dylan, I can give you up to $1 million to expand your business." And I was like, very excited. And I was like, wow, this is a chance, I can, and then I started thinking about it. And then what do you do? I was earning money and I had a comfortable life, compared to what I was as a child. Really, I mean, I was going hungry. Well, not only me, my brothers as well. And then, to find yourself in Switzerland having a nice life, and I had everything I needed. I began to ask, what is the meaning of life? You wake up, you go to work, and you are tired when you come back home, and then it just repeats day after day. I began to ask the question, what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? Now somebody's offering you $1 million, and I said, no, I'm not interested in that. I want to do something else. So I remember it was one winter evening. I was under the shower, and I said, okay, I'm going to go around the world. That's that's what I always wanted to do as a child. I decided to sell my business off. A week later, a guy walks into my workshop and says, hey, Dylan, I mean, he was one of my customers. He was a car mechanic, and he was looking for a workshop like mine to buy. So I said, here, you can have it. So it was so easy. So I sold my business to him. Couple of months later, I was on my motorcycle, traveling around the world, looking for the meaning of life.
What year was this?
2010.
Did you have a big plan in mind as to where you were going to travel?
No, I called it Around the World 360. I wanted to go around the world, 360 degrees and come back. I had no idea where I was going. In certain places, I tossed a coin to decide which way I should be going. I find it quite unattractive to read guidebooks and to go, do the same path as somebody else had done. Like you're trying to rediscover what somebody else had discovered. So I didn't read any guidebooks. I was like, I said, no, I just want to discover the world by myself. I want to be Columbus.
Well, that's sort of why I asked what year it was, really, because without mentioning the obvious, I just wondered whether you'd followed other people's trips or whether other people's trips had been on your...
Not at all. I can tell you a nice story. When I was on the road, I thought I was the only man traveling around the world with a motorcycle. First of all, I went up towards Russia through Lithuania, Latvia, and then I came to the Russian border. While the immigration officers were, dealing with my passport, I saw this another biker. He came and parked next to me. And I started talking to him. I was like, very happy and confidently. I was telling him, I'm going around the world, blah, blah, blah. Just started my tour like, I don't know, a month ago. So I asked him, so what do you do? He says, yeah, I'm also traveling. I said, how long? 5 years he's been on the road. I was just, so confidently bragging about, my tour. And I like, what? There's somebody else traveling around the world. I was like, I didn't see him after that, actually,
Can you pass it on? We'll get him on the podcast.
Well, that's a great frame of mind to have, I think. To set off with that in your head that you're the only person doing it. I think that's a great attitude to take.
I didn't even know that there were like biker meetings taking place. 2.5 years later, I was in Canada and I met this guy. He's a biker and he invited me to his house and I went. He was a really cool guy. And he said, hey, there's a biker meeting taking place. Let's go there. It was Horizons Unlimited in Nakasp. So I was like, what is biker meeting? And then, we went there. And I see this bunch of, 200 bikes or 300 bikes. I can't remember exactly how many they were there. I was like, dumbfounded. Really, what are they doing here? I found it was quite crazy because, you if you have bikes, you should be riding, not just, come together, meet up and, and then, they wanted to charge me money to get in. Like $60. I remember the Susan Grant. She was there and she said it cost, I don't know, I can't remember. It was like $80 or $60 or $80. And I said, surely not. I go. So, and she asked me what I was doing. I said, I'm going around the world. She said, can you do a presentation? I said, what is a presentation? And she said, yeah, put some photos and talk about it. I said, yeah, sure. Then you can come for free. I said, oh yeah, I can do that. That was my very first presentation at a biker meeting. Well, it was my first biker meeting. Anyway, that was pretty cool.
Because this is a motorbike podcast, you need to tell people what motorbike you were traveling on.
GS 1150 BMW.
Big BMW.
Yeah, I mean, I bought that motorcycle not because of I was a fan of that motorcycle. It was because I had other motorcycles, and I knew that BMW is the only motorcycle had the shaft. So I was kind of a lazy biker. I didn't want to spend time lubricating the chain. It saves you a lot of time. I want to ride the motorcycle, not spray oil on the chain every morning.
Just out of interest, and this will become more relevant later, did you buy that motorcycle from new, or was it second-hand when you bought it?
It was a year old, and it had 16,000 kilometers on it.
All right, still fairly new then.
I had that motorcycle like 5 years before I went on the tour.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
So I was going to say, did you find it a big bike? But you'd obviously got used to its size.
Yeah. I mean, it was a comfortable motorcycle, and it's a great bike. Even I had done in the deserts and climbing sand dunes, and really it's a pretty good bike. I met a German guy, and we traveled a bit together for a couple of days in Oman. We saw these sand dunes, and we started riding up the sand dunes, and he had a smaller motorcycle. And my GS, I was able to go, climb higher than him. BMW should be paying me for this.
Didn't you do something like 300,000 kilometers on that bike?
Yes.
Amazing.
Well, that's reassuring. I've just bought one recently, Dylan, and I'm just still getting over the size and the weight of it and the general feel of it when I ride it. It's the biggest thing I've ever ridden in my life, not just from a cubic capacity point of view. It's just physically huge. I mean, it's a very exciting thing to ride around on.
How that motorcycle is really a good motorcycle, good wear and tear. I can tell you a couple of stories. The clutch started slipping when I was in Colombia 3 years into my tour, and I had to take the whole bike apart. I did everything myself, and when I took the clutch plate out, the service limit was like 4.5 millimeters. When it's new, I think it's like 6 millimeters. My clutch plate had like 5.5 millimeters.
No way.
Really. And the problem was oil seal was broken, and it just, pushed oil into the clutch plate, and it started slipping. I remember a few times along the road, I started off in the second gear or third gear mistakenly. So you're revving and you're like, oh shit, did I ruin my clutch now? Oh, I don't want, but in the end it's a pretty good.
It's robust, isn't it? Yeah, really.
Yeah,
is.
very robust. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you say that happened in Colombia, because to get to Colombia you had to pass the Darien Gap. So if people haven't heard of Dylan's book and Dylan's film, both called When the Road Ends, you absolutely have to watch the film and read the book, because it is, I was chatting to Dylan before Noel joined us, it's probably one of, if not the greatest motorbike adventure travel stories I think I've seen or heard. It's a remarkable story. Interestingly enough, there's very little motorbike action in it. It's mainly on a boat. But it's still a motorbike story, right? It still counts.
Of course.
Have you seen the film, Noel?
I haven't, no.
Get Lost.
No, I don't see anything.
Oh, God. He hasn't seen Easy Rider either. So let's talk about the story of, and maybe if you can explain what the Darien Gap is and what you actually did to get around that gap.
As I mentioned earlier, I didn't know much about the world. I mean, I knew that there are so many countries. I knew certain amount of information, but I never read guidebooks. So I wasn't really, traveling with other bikers. So in Canada, this guy who took me to this motorcycle meeting, in fact, he's the one who told me about the Darien Gap. He he told me, look, Dylan, make sure that you will book or find a sailboat in advance before you get to Panama. Otherwise, you'll have to spend a lot of time looking for a boat to go around the Darien. And I was like, what is the Darien? And then he told me about the Darien Gap. The Darien Gap is basically I think, they call it Darien Gap. Is it because there's a piece of road missing there, right? It's a gap.
Yeah.
I guess so, yeah.
This huge jungle region between Panama and Colombia. There are no roads going through. I mean, let alone roads. There are not even footpaths going through that jungle. Nowadays, I have seen a couple of documentaries, even after doing this thing, that a lot of refugees, they are coming, people who can't get like Bangladeshis or Indians or whoever, they fly to Colombia or South American countries where they can get a visa. And then they would walk through that jungle into towards the North American continent. It's a arduous journey. It takes 2-3 weeks to walk across. I think even those guys, they take like guides, smugglers to show them the way. So it's a very difficult terrain to cross. So if you are traveling with a motorcycle, there's no way you can ride through it. I mean, if you want to, I think later on I have heard also there's some other European guy. He went through the Darien Gap, but I think he had lots of help, right? People pushing and pulling and
yeah, they made a film about it, and basically they hired a load of local guys and have basically carried their bikes through the jungle, or pretty much all the way.
So it's the guys with the KLRs. And some of the clutches died on the way through, and had to actually leave the KLRs in the jungle.
I think all their clutches died in the end.
Right, yeah. So anyway, I mean, I wanted to do it by myself. When I heard the story that, it was going to be difficult to find a ferry, because there are no ferries between Panama and Colombia. So you have to go to this dodgy city called Colon and find a boat captain who would take you across the Caribbean Sea. And when I heard that, actually, I was quite thrilled, because then I knew that, hey, this is it's an adventure. It was also one of my childhood dreams to build a raft and to sail the seas, because we in Sri Lanka is a small island. As a child, if you want to go and see the world, you would have to have a boat first.
Can I just say that Britain is a small island, and I would not attempt what you did.
You guys have enough ferries, no?
An inner tube in a lake, and that's about it.
So going back to the Darien, yeah. So Darien Gap was there, and I had to do something. Not I had to do something. In order to get to Colombia, you had to go and look for a boat captain, and it wasn't easy. So I heard lots of stories. I can probably build my own boat or raft, which I did with 10 empty oil barrels, and put them together. I made a pontoon boat and put my motorcycle on it, fixed a propeller to my drive shaft, and off I went.
You've made that sound very straightforward. Did you sort of draw plans for it, or did you just start off building it and see
I
how
did.
It went as you did
I
it?
did draw plans, but drawing plans is one thing. Once you start doing it, it's a whole different story, because I got into lots of trouble. I mean, I'm a motorcyclist. I've never been on the ocean. I never built a boat, never, let alone building boats. I never even rowed a boat.
Were you building it in the middle of nowhere, or were you sort of in a fairly
in Panama City?
And were people coming up to you saying, "What the hell are you doing?"
No, actually, I met some cool characters in Panama, running away from the law and all that. It's just dodgy characters.
Have you not worked in Panama ever?
No, I've never been.
Really? Amazing.
Part of the one of the jokes on this podcast, Dylan, is that everybody that comes on and mentions a faraway place, I've worked there at some point. But no,
some connection.
Central America is beyond my experience.
This is the watershed moment in the podcast. Incredible.
But a character that's in the film quite a lot is Jacques. I liked Jacques a lot. He seems a really good character, really cool
He's
character.
a nice guy.
Yeah.
It wasn't only Jacques. I had 3 guys who helped me, but of course, I don't have any film material of them. I never intended to make a film, so I can't really tell the whole story. So you have to read the book.
Do both, everybody. You won't regret it. Jacques recommended you fix a sail to your raft as well, doesn't he, at some point? But you didn't have enough money to get a sail. There's this fantastic bit where Jacques acquires a sail from a boat that's just been harboured for, tied up for years and never used. And I think he uses the phrase, the sail would be more useful for somebody that has more dreams than money.
Exactly.
That's his justification.
That's a lovely part in the film, no?
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, very, very good.
So can you just describe the raft? I mean, it's fairly, I've seen the photo of it on the book, but how big is it and what holds it together?
I had 5 barrels mounted in 2 rows. So I had like 10 oil drums, and they were connected with galvanized pipes.
Roped or bolted together?
No, bolted.
Yeah.
I'm a mechanic,
right.
Not a sailor. I bolt everything. These pirates, they tried to teach me knots. I was hopeless remembering knots.
And the first time you put it on the water, how stable was it?
It was very stable. Actually, I was scared the first time when I put it into the water. We basically drove along the Panama Canal into the ocean because it was in the Panama Canal I built it.
We haven't really properly explained that you actually adapted your motorcycle to actually propel the boat. So how complicated was that to get this is where the drive shaft comes in, I suppose, doesn't it? That you've already got a shaft.
So, when I heard about this story in Canada about the Darien Gap and all that, I literally started planning. I knew that, this is what I'm going to do. But of course, you couldn't tell people that, you're going to go on the ocean. So I used to tell people, I'm going to go on the Amazon River, build a raft and go along the Amazon River. But in reality, I was like, every time when I saw the ocean, when I was riding along there, I was like, I stopped the motorcycle and I was watching the waves. I was like trying to figure out, how I'm going to build this thing that it wouldn't capsize. And also, the drive shaft. So I bought a second final drive, that massive bit attached to the rear wheel. So I bought second-hand a part of that, and then I halved it. I basically took a saw, a metal saw, and a hacksaw, and I cut it in half, and I threw away the pinion and all the rubbish, and I only kept the bearing, and I attached a shaft to that bearing, extended it by, I think, like 1.5 meters, and put a propeller. So the propeller also I bought it in Arizona. It's funny, Arizona is a desert. but I found a boat shop in Arizona. You walk into the boat shop and tell them, look, I want a propeller, and they ask me, so what is your boat?
What,
So I said,
what model?
11.
Yeah,
I said 1150 GS, and they never heard of that boat.
You've built your raft, and it is a raft with oil drums, and you made some fiberglass cones to go on the front to break through the waves, presumably.
Yes.
So you've got 2 choices then. You can either go, so basically you're going from Panama into Colombia. You can either go to the east around the Caribbean or to the west through the Pacific Ocean, which is a great big expanse of water, great big terrifying expanse of water, full of dangerous people transporting drugs and doing other nefarious activities. So which one did you choose and why?
Actually, I wanted to go from Colón to Cartagena because that's what everybody's doing. That is how you travel. You go to Colón and then take a boat to Cartagena. But when I told this to my, friends, my dodgy friends, they were all sailors. They 3 of them, they had sailboats. And they said, look, Dylan, don't go to Colón. Colón is a very dangerous place. Better, go on the Pacific, because the Pacific is also calmer than the Caribbean. Because Caribbean, you hit tornadoes or whatever, hurricanes or whatever you call them. The waves are high and all that. They said, take the Pacific, which I did. But of course, the problem was from Colón to Cartagena is like 500 kilometers. But on the other way, on the Pacific, it was like nearly 800 kilometers. And the real problem was nobody knew nothing about that region. Nobody could tell me if there are villages, if you can get petrol, there's nothing. It was 2013, and I remember trying to go into Google Maps and trying to enlarge in the pictures or the satellite images and try to figure out. You saw nothing. It was so like blurred, all jungle, all the way down to Buenaventura. And my friends or people in Panama I met, I tried to get information. Nobody knew nothing. It was a very brave decision, actually. But I was into adventure, no?
Brave, certainly brave. There's probably other words I'd use to describe it. But
as you set off, how many days are you anticipating being at sea?
I thought I could do it in 2 weeks. Like, if you calculate 750 kilometers, if you are constantly, motoring, basically you can do that, 24 hours a day.
So how far out at sea are you at the greatest sort of point?
I plan to go. The first part was the most difficult because I had to go from Panama City across the Bay of San Miguel towards a place called Garachine. And once you reach Garachine, it would be, you'd be just going along the coast all the way to Buenaventura. That was my plan. But the problem was, probably you must be the problem. I had a lot of problems. It wasn't that easy because planning wasn't easy. I had no idea about the consumption, the petrol consumption, how many liters it would take to, I calculated like a motorcyclist, my bike does 100 kilometers, 5.5 liters.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing in the manual about fathoms and nautical miles.
No, I didn't find anything in the manual. No.
I mean, as we're talking, I'm just looking I'm doing what you did. Yeah, I'm looking at Google Maps, and it just looks terrifying. I have sea kayaks, Dylan, and they're terrifying to take out on the sea. I tried not to go out more than about 30 meters from the shore. So the idea of doing this. Also, salt. I don't like taking my motorcycle to the seaside for fish and chips, never mind putting it in the sea. How did it fare? Well, this is probably the question we should ask at the end. Well, let's come back to that.
It's a good time to ask that question, I think, because that's very much a large part of the film is how his motorcycle fared in the sea. Tell us a little bit about the problems you have, because obviously a large part of the film is when your motorcycle isn't running. You had some issues with it, which you couldn't resolve whilst out at sea, right?
You travel around the world. You go through Asia, Australia, North America, and all that. Of course, I had issues with the motorcycle, but I never had any issues with the engine. Like press the button, always started. The very first time I put that, we launched the raft, drove it to the open sea and anchored it behind Shark's boat. I had a problem there. The oil lamp, the oil pressure lamp was coming up. And I was like, what the hell's going on? You do all this and then you come the first time you put this into the ocean, you have a problem. There was an easy fix because, I figured out it can't be the oil pressure because I took parts out and I checked the oil pressure was there. It was a faulty switch. And the next problem was a few days later in San Miguel. Well, in San Miguel, I was in the middle of the ocean, actually, when the motor didn't work. And that was the whole sensor. It was broken. And I was able to figure that out after many, many hours. Imagine trying to repair a motorcycle somewhere in the outback.
It's worse than that because if you drop a bolt or a screw or something, you can kind of find it in the sand. Whereas if you drop a bolt in the ocean, it's gone.
That's another side story. I can tell you how difficult. You have no idea how many tools I dropped into the ocean, how many nuts and bolts. Once I took out the oil cap. The oil cap, you have only one of them, right? And you think, I got this, you cannot lose. And I pressed it so hard, and it then popped out of my fingers and just disappears. After that, I had this the problem with the the hall sensor and the bike didn't work. I really had to, look for help. So fortunately, Shark had mounted a sail on my raft. 2 days long, I came back towards Panama City. Well, but not Panama City, this archipelago called Las Perlas. And there's this little village called San Miguel. I was able to come there, and I was helped by the police there. What they did was they said, "Amigo, we can help you, but what can we do?" They were no mechanics.
What was their reaction when they first saw you?
They made big eyes, and they were like all kind of, "What the hell is this?" And they were quite friendly. I mean, the guy, the officer there, the officer in charge, he said, "I know you don't have a permit to sail this thing." "We are not going to ask you any questions," he said. Because it was an illegal journey, right? I think I shouldn't spoil, if anyone wants to watch the film.
Yeah, no, good idea. Yeah.
They know the end because you're here now talking about it many years later. So he makes it, folks. That's the good news.
Well, you did make it, but were there ever times where you just thought, "I've gone too far. This is crazy"? Were you ever in fear of your life?
Can I just say I thought that about every 5 minutes watching the film. I was just incredulous that you would have the balls and the bravery to even attempt it. 'Cause it looked at times when you're drifting 120 miles away from the coast, hopefully towards the Galapagos Island, which will stop you from ending up in the middle of the Pacific. I would have been absolutely terrified. But I think I wrote down the quote. I think I wrote it down here. You said, "I wasn't really very worried."
I saw how stable my raft was. Like, I went through 2 storms, by the way. And, once you realize that, nothing's going to happen, I mean, as long as, the metal tubes don't break, or I knew I was, that thing would stay afloat. That was a great consolation, It was like, I mean, if a storm comes, and this is the way I was thinking, like, if the storm comes, if I capsize, I don't need to worry, because then I would be even in a more stable position, because then you have a keel, right? My motorcycle would act like a keel. It would be super, super stable. The biggest issue I had was the navigation. I mean, I wasn't as I already mentioned, I wasn't a sailor, and I had no idea about navigation, but I had my GPS, right? So this GPS worked fine as I traveled around the world. Mind you, I did not have any maps installed in it. So it had this basic base map, and that is how I navigated myself around the world. So if I want to go somewhere, I just go to Google and get the coordinates and put it in, and it would just show me with an arrow where I should go. And it always worked on land. But when I was at sea, it wasn't working. I had a terrible time trying to figure out, why it wasn't working, because I hadn't taken into account that there are very strong currents. I mean, I knew about currents. And you hear currents, yeah, of course, current is there. But I had no idea how fast they were. In those days, in 2013, the sun and the moon, they all came, you saw both of them in the sky together. That affected the tidal waves incredibly. You had like in Panama in those days, they had 6 meters between the low tide and the high tide. The difference was like 6 meters. And imagine when the tide is going out into the sea, into the ocean, amount of water that would take with you. I think probably, on top of that, the currents, usual currents, they had this Humboldt current that comes from the South America, along the South American, the continent, and then it would just go out into the ocean at the equator. And this would take you not in the direction that I intended to go. I was going kind of east, but this thing was taking me, towards Galapagos and beyond. I hoped, yeah. Well, I didn't really hope. I thought, that something's going to. No, I was still a little bit faster than the current, But my problem was this GPS needed some speed. GPS would only work accurately when you are traveling a decent amount of speed. Like in my case, it needed 8 kilometers per hour.
How hard was the bike having to work? Like, what gear are you in, do you think?
A sixth gear, the top gear.
Right.
Yeah. The problem was, when you couldn't really get the maximum out of the engine, because when you rev it, the propeller would come out of the water because of the waves also. It would just suck in, it makes cavitation. It would just whoop, whoop, just the air sucks in and you lose power. So you couldn't really rev the engine and go faster.
There was a sweet spot then, would you say?
The ocean was calm. If you have no waves at all, then it would work, no problem. You could go faster.
I can't believe I'm actually having this conversation as if I'm sort of asking things that will be helpful for the people who might take on this quest. I don't think it's going to happen, is it? It's never happened again.
I hope not. I really do hope not.
By the way, if I am to make a second raft, it would come out a lot better. I have learned a lot,
Oh, man. Take a Honda as well. Your estimate of 14 days turned into how many days in the end?
Nearly 60.
Oh, my God.
How much food and drink did you have on board with you?
Food wasn't an issue, actually. It was more petrol, because I had dry ration, took lots of canned food. Food wasn't I wasn't scared. I think I could have survived probably for a couple of months.
Did you lose weight as you were doing it?
No, because I was eating.
Right. What about sleeping, Dylan? How easy was it to sleep?
That was my biggest problem. I was sleep deprived. I was constantly tired on that raft. I was working also, you had to repair, when one thing breaks down and you repair it, and because something else breaks down. And then I had to watch out for other boats, even in the night, you couldn't just sail blindly. I was drifting a lot of the time. I had to look out. I mean, I saw no boat. Nobody would travel on that, in that part of the region. If I had taken the Caribbean Sea instead of Pacific, it would have been a lot different. I think I would have met boats and, plenty of traffic going up and down.
So you never had that castaway moment where there's a great big container ship?
No. There were no container ships, nothing. A couple of times I saw, these reconnaissance aircrafts. I think the Americans, they were keeping things, they were checking if nobody's taking drugs or things like that. So I think, they must have figured out, this guy is going, he can't be going, he's not going north. So he's going somewhere else. He can't be a drug pusher. And once a helicopter came, he was just flying quite far away, and then he saw me, and then he came and did a round, and I was trying to make myself as small as possible, not to get his attention, because I was like scared. It was an illegal journey, right? Because the Panamanian authorities, they didn't want to let me go. And they said, you're not going to go. He's illegal. So I thought, every time there was an interaction with the police or some sort of, official, then I knew that, that might be the end of my adventure. But the policemen in San Miguel, they were quite cool. They helped me. But of course, in the film, you only see one part of it because, I have no film material to show, tell more about it. But in the book, you read, Clive, I think you read that when there was a change of police officers, the other lot, they tried to confiscate my raft and, they didn't want to let me go. But in the end, eventually I was able to be nice with them and, talk with them and, they just crazy guy, let him go.
Probably the most remarkable bit of the film is where both of your navigation devices, you've got a walker's compass, which isn't working because there's too much metal on the boat, and you've got your motorcycle sat-nav, which doesn't work because you're not going quick enough. So you basically decide you don't know which is the correct direction to go. So you switch your engine off and you're drifting. And at that point, after 2 or 3 days, something pretty miraculous comes to your rescue. And I don't know, should we tell people this? Should we spoil the film? It was legitimate, right? It worked.
Yeah, it is, this is one of the reasons why I never regret doing this, because I have done lots of presentations. I have, told this story many times, and I would say 99% of the time I get like very positive feedback. An occasional person would try to, nullify what you've done. You're an idiot. You're more than an idiot. You should not never done that. Try to scold. I had one of these conversations quite recently with a Canadian guy. He was keep writing comments and try to make you look like a. He was telling me that I am a leading candidate for Darwin's Award. After having experienced all these incredible things on the ocean, I have to tell you that it changed my life completely. The way I see life, the way I feel life, and what this life is all about. I tell you, it's nobody could understand. I can't describe that feeling. I mean, how many people could tell I have been saved by dolphins? Anybody would tell that I was once saved by dolphins, you'd think, he's a nutcase.
It's certainly not something you hear every day.
Yeah. Fortunately, I have the film video footage to prove that.
You said you see life differently, but you also must see life differently. See what I did there? Noel, if you haven't seen it, and anybody else that hasn't seen it, you have to watch it, because basically what happens is a pod of dolphins for a few days are swimming around your raft, aren't they, Dylan?
They came back for 2 days. I was pretty elated. I was alone and I had nothing to do, and I was just drifting on this vast ocean. And all of a sudden, these guys show up, and I was pretty happy, and played with them, went for a swim with them, and then the next day they came back. They keep coming back, and only then I realized, hey, maybe they're trying to tell me something, or they're trying to help me. Even to this day, I can't tell for sure. I wouldn't say that the dolphins helped me purposely. Maybe it was just a coincidence that I started following them, and they just guided me in the right direction. But when I mentioned this to one of the ocean biologists, and he said, nah, he doesn't believe that the dolphins could, be that clever. I showed him some of the footage, and then he wrote to me and he said, Dylan, he can't explain this, because dolphins like to play and, swim with the wake. They like to, follow boats, but they would only have fun as long as you have speed. As long as you got a substantial amount of speed, that they it's fun for them. But in your case, you had no speed, and they were still going in front of you and guiding you. So he says he's baffled.
The reality is, you decided you were going to follow the dolphins, and the dolphins, you switched your engine back on. You weren't sure which way you should go, so you ended up following the dolphins because you had a feeling that they would lead you in the right direction. Yeah. And they did. So it worked.
Absolutely. When you go in the same direction, you can see that in your GPS, it would draw dots. It just shows your tracks. And then I knew, hey, I'm going in a straight line. I'm going towards land. What happens is, when you don't have the speed, your GPS, it can't pick up your exact position, because there is a kind of a, like, it can be like 20 meters or 30 meters. The accuracy is like probably 20 meters. So he thinks that you are like 20 meters away on the other side and 20 meters on this side. That's why it needs speed. So once you have a speed, it can detect you quite accurately where you are. But in my case, if you don't have that speed.
How soon after leaving the Dolphins then do you see land?
Oh, the same morning.
Really?
They guided me for 2 days. Yeah. I mean, they weren't there the whole time. Like,
no.
Sometimes, so all of a sudden they just went off, and you could see them like a kilometer away feeding. They were like eating, and then after they finished, they're done with their their supper, they would come back. And when they came back, I started the engine, and we started the journey, the adventure.
You don't sit on the motorcycle, do you, on the raft? You just stand next. Does the throttle still stay on the handlebars?
Oh, sometimes.
But you would sit on the bike on the raft?
That is my seat, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where the captain sits, obviously. And what kind of area do you land in? Is it sort of, do you land in a sort of a populated area? Are there people, did natives come down the beach to celebrate your triumphant arrival?
No, actually, I landed, I was still in the jungle. I was planning to go to Buenaventura. Buenaventura is the next big city with road connection. I went through a storm, and the storm did some damages to my raft. I mean, not to the raft, to my motorcycle. Like, I think probably a driftwood or something hit the sight glass, check the oil, and it cracked. So the oil started seeping out. So I knew that, I had to end the journey as soon as possible. So I was already in Colombia then, but still in the jungle. So I came to this place called Ardita, a small village with 15 families living there, or were living there. So when I actually, it's quite cool to see in my film. That's how my film starts. Actually, I went back to Ardita. When I came back, I never thought I could make a film because I didn't have enough footage. So I thought maybe it's good if I go back and do some interviews and see the raft again. And so when I went back, I guess you should see the film. No, I should not spoil it.
Once you made it back to somewhere there was a road, you continued your journey through South America.
Once I abandoned the raft in Ardeta, I went to Buenaventura with a cargo boat.
Which is the sensible thing you should have done in the first place.
I couldn't find a cargo boat. It was quite easily. I converted the raft into a motorcycle. It took me probably like 2 hours.
To get it back to a bike again took 2 hours?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. It was. I bolted it with, into the raft with like four bolts, and then took the final drive out and put the old final drive with the wheel back on. And
to get going again, how did you fix the sight glass?
I carried a hell of a lot of like junk with me. Junk. When I say junk, I'm a mechanic. I'm a very creative guy.
When I say.
No, I'm not talking about building rafts and stuff. I'm talking about doing anything. I like to be very creative. When I see a problem, I only see solutions. So I carried a lot of things in my panniers which had nothing to do with motorcycles or, like repairing. So I was like repairing water taps for people, whenever somebody said, yeah, would you like to come and stay at my place? And I do something for them. In this pannier, I found a shim, the valve adjusting shims from a car. I don't know why I took that with me. And that thing fitted exactly in the where the glass was, and it was exactly the same size.
Coincidentally, it's also exactly the same size as a dolphin's blowhole.
Spooky. Once you got back on the road afterwards, did it feel like an anticlimax in a way, or were you just so relieved to have made it?
You failed to ask me an important question. That is, were you not seasick? But I can answer you that question. I wasn't seasick, but once I got back on land, I was land sick. Like 2 months, I was like, constantly, everything's moving.
It didn't occur to me because I was just thinking of all the multitude of other things you had to deal with, and seasickness seemed like the least of your worries to me. But obviously, that would have been horrendous, wouldn't it, if you had suffered back?
That would have been a terrible. Yeah, probably I would have had to give up the whole thing, because seasickness is not funny.
I think over the years, I've spotted so many little articles in newspapers about some man or woman who's been found in a life raft or on a disabled yacht in the Pacific. And I've just spotted these articles so many times over the years, it's left me thinking that at any given point in time, there is always somebody drifting around in the Pacific trying to survive. And so I suppose in the same way that if I met somebody who'd been stuck in a life raft for 2 months, my first question to them wouldn't be, did you suffer from seasickness at all? I'd be more concerned about how they ate and drank and survived. So back to my point about my fear of seawater. Did the seawater have a detrimental effect on the bike at all?
It didn't. I mean, I was expecting it to go rusty like after a couple of weeks, but it showed no signs of rust at all. But once I got back to land, I washed it thoroughly and rode all the way down to Argentina. Once I came back to Switzerland, I didn't even wash it. Right, I just kept it. I have it in a barn here, stored in a barn. And now I can see that the pegs, foot rests, they don't work, and certain other pieces, you can see that it's heavily corroded. I mean, corrosion is more like oxide.
Have you got barnacles on the bash plate?
I'm thinking of giving my motorcycle to a museum. So if anybody wants a motorcycle with a story.
We're starting to hear about these bikes that have done these trips.
That aren't in museums.
We need to start a fucking museum. People are missing a trick here.
First of all, I just want to say a massive apology for Noel's terrible language at the end of this podcast there. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Massive thank you to Dylan. Fucking hell. Listen, you've got to watch this film. When the Road Ends. It's on YouTube. You can watch it for free, or you can go to Vimeo and watch it on there for a few quid, which obviously will help Dylan no end. Dylan's going to be at the ABR Festival introducing his film and then doing a fireside chat afterwards. So go along and see him if you can. He's a massively engaging chap, and what a remarkable story. So make sure you go along there as well. We will certainly be there, so we'll see you there. Thanks again, Dylan. See you next time, guys and girls. Cheers. Sorry, one more thing. The voting is now open for the finalists of the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast Awards for 2023. So the more votes we can get on there for the finalists, the better. There's about 31 different sections you can vote in. There's 5 finalists in each category. That said, only takes a couple of minutes to vote, so please go to our social media channels, Instagram and Facebook, find the link and get voting. Appreciate it. Cheers. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.